Greetings, friendship families. Pastor Nathan here. You know, during this stay-at-home season that we've been in, I don't know about you, but it has been a mess of emotions going on in our home. And as I've thought about how many emotions are being shared, and it just feels like there's so many feelings that are swirling in our homes. And one of these emotions that I'd love to take a few minutes and isolate and think about is this emotion of anger. And as I think about anger in general, it is something that really reveals what is at the core of our heart. What are we most concerned about that's being taken away, or most concerned about that's being maybe threatened in some way? And as I've thought about this topic of anger, several things come to mind. One is that in Scripture we see that anger is not inherently evil, that there is a kind of righteous indignation, a kind of being able to be angry and sinning not, that we see in Scripture. In fact, in the Old Testament, the wrath of God is a real thing that we see over and over again. And even in the New Testament, Jesus being very upset at certain things to the point of like legit anger is telling that we as Christians should at times be angry. But there's a way that we should be angry, and when we are angry, we should do some angry audits or angry assessments. We should be considering what it is that's making us angry and why. So, for example, as you think about Jesus, think of that one episode where he went into the temple, saw those people turning it into what he called a den of thieves. He threw the money changer tables over and was just really ticked. And what did he say? You've taken the house of prayer and made it into this den of robbers or thieves. I think at the core of that, people's greed were keeping other people from Jesus. Think of the way that he would talk to the Pharisees. And he called them like whitewashed tombs full of dead man's bones. I mean, really choice, angry words that he would have time and time again to these religious rulers of the day. And I think at the core, there was a sense in which rules and self-righteousness was keeping people from Jesus, that the rules the Pharisees were setting up were keeping people from genuine encounters with Jesus. Anger was surrounding this notion of people being kept from Jesus and from true and godly religion. Similarly, in the Old Testament, if you think of all the times God, in his wrath, is frustrated with his people, you could see that forgetfulness and just a host of sins were keeping people from God, that their hearts were being drifted towards the other nations and practicing things of the other nations. And so time and time again, you see anger, but you see it attached to something connected to God. And I think for me, what's been the most convicting during this stay-at-home time is as I've looked at the things that have been ticking me off the most and sat with my thoughts and sat with my anger and thought, why am I so mad? Well, it's because of my own self-preservation, my own self-comfort. Often it's something connected to myself, not necessarily something connected to God. And the question I want us to be asking during this time is, what does your anger tell your family about God? If the only time they see you mad is when you are being bothered or annoyed, something connected to you, I think that can be problematic. So for example, I've talked with high school students and their parents a lot, and sometimes high school students can make really poor choices, and the parents can be really upset. And when they come to me, they say, "Can you believe what my student did?" And they are off the charts upset at this. And as they're yelling and frustrated, I ask, is this the most angry that they've ever seen you? Yeah, probably. I think I was really bent out of shape. And what about this poor choice is making you the most upset? Well, it's the fact that they directly defied me, or this thing really inconveniences me, is unfortunately often the case that's driving this just intense anger. And the pushback I give and try to encourage parents with is the things that should make us level 10 angry, at least according to Scripture, should be things connected to an attack on God, whether it's someone keeping someone else from Jesus, or Jesus' name being dragged through the mud, or in some way direct attacks on something connected to God. I feel like that should be level 10. And if it's if all of our level 10 anger is connected to just our own being put out, I think it can communicate something that's unhealthy for our kids. And I think it's very dangerous during this time to be overly, condescending or frustrating to one another. I recognize that this is a difficult season, a very difficult season, and I don't expect emotions to always be the right way and in check, but I think it is healthy for us to assess, what is my anger telling my family about who God is? And I would actually encourage some of us to actually get angry. Get angry at the things that God is getting angry about. And there are some things going on right now that are keeping people from loving and worshiping God, and we should be upset about those things. People should see our anger attached to God's name not being honored, God's name not being glorified the way that it should. And I know as I've thought about people's lack of honoring God the way He ought to be honored and loving God the way He ought to be loved, I don't feel like, my anger level stays pretty low with that. It's more of an annoyance level. I think some ways we need to switch that. Some of the things that we're ticked off about should stay at the annoyance level, and we should actually show our kids true anger when God doesn't get the honor and the glory that He deserves. And I think at Friendship often about this thing that we will regularly say, we are about loving, living, and serving like Jesus. And I would just add, and we should be angry like Jesus. The things that anger Jesus the most should anger us the most. Not just the things that inconvenience us or threaten our self-preservation or self-comfort, but ultimately, let's get upset at the injustices and the lack of love for and worship of Jesus that we see so often in our daily lives, and let's attack that. That is more formative for our kids than even telling them you should care about this, you shouldn't care about that. When they watch what you get most upset about, that is way more formative for their development. So this week, let's assess our anger and let's look to God to make some adjustments in our emotions that match the same emotions that Jesus modeled so well for us on earth. That's my prayer for us and my prayer for you. God bless.